Everything that artists make is a reflection, consciously or not, of their historical moment, their place, and their reflection of a community's wants and needs. Or not. That depends on the dynamic between the artist and the community. All art reflects an exchange between the artist, their art, and the community. Those are the three legs of the stool that actually create the combination where artists can collaborate by making something which is a reflection of the community. And that is about the many things that communities respond to, including, as we know now, under the neoliberals, that they have created their own culture, which is imposed upon the rest of us through schooling, through popular culture, through the news, and that's what we are subsumed within all the time. And it goes back to what Einstein said about trying to solve a problem. You never solve a problem inside the mindset that created the problem. You always have to step out of it. And I think that is exactly what has to happen with artists. They always have to step out of the world that is seemingly the real world, and actually be able to look at it and reflect it back. And that's one of the contributions that artists can make to their community. And the other one, which I think is really important, is when you decide that you want to give those who are voiceless a voice. And you make that choice, that's what you want to do. That is what's important as an artist, to reflect what the community's needs and wants really are. And that serves as the basis for the way in which the community can relate to the work that you do.
There was a point, I think it was at the turn of around about 2000, when I got so infuriated by what I was witnessing in the newspapers, especially the Daily Mail and the Daily Express was demonising refugees, asylum seekers. Being Jewish, it kind of, that's when it really hit me. I'm a Jew here, and I actually, what's happening, I know these papers were anti-Semitic, but they've got a new agenda. And as a painter, I knew I had a voice. My work was, before that, was very much about to do with movement and colour and music. And I was trying to harness also elements of my Jewish heritage. I was very much interested in Jewish mysticism. So I'm going to cut the story short. Then Robert and Robert made a film about council estates, which really, really touched me. Don't give up my council estate. When Robert made that film, and I remember going up to Robert and saying, that film really, really touched me, because I thought, it took an American to make a bloody film about how the English have sold our council house. From that moment on, we started to talk and discuss and share ideas, and it's just got closer and closer and closer. So, artist as citizen, I was brought up kind of believing that artists work on their own, but you don't. So it's been profound for me working with other artists. And just one thing I wanted to say as well, the sheer act of painting is almost like you turn your back on the world to paint. You actually do that. And I know the world, it's a funny experience that, when I work, I turn my back on the world. I know I do that. And I leave something outside. Because the physicality of painting is a way of, and then you go into some other world, or some other discipline, some other...
I have to generalize sometimes and use the word artist in reference to myself, but I never think of myself as an artist. I think of myself as a documentarist. And there is a profound difference between what Ricky and Cedric do and what I do. And the difference is that when you do what I do, you have to be there. And not only do you have to be there as a witness, but you also have to be there thinking, what images do I need to tell this story? How do I tell the story? So there's these two realities going on. One is the world around you, sometimes, as you can see by the pictures, threatening the world. And the other thing is saying, all right, well, I need to get this kind of image, I need to get this kind of image, and of course I need to say, where is this happening? Who's doing it? Why is it happening? What's happening? And how is it happening? And all of that stuff is going on in my head. I'm not just holding a camera, I'm actually trying to figure out how, when I go away from here, I've collected the material I need to have in order to make a picture. Whereas artists, of course, whomsoever, I mean, whether they're literary, whether they're poets, whether they're painters or sculptors, they can perceive the world and absorb it as they wish in any way walk away from it, go to their loft, their studio, and actually paint a picture or write a piece of music because of what they've heard on the streets. I can't do that. I have to collect the information whilst there. Filming is the same. So documentarism is very different than the way in which artists operate and work. And having done a film about Ricky as well, I found it deeply, profoundly affected me. I always think with the lawyers, this must be something, because you have to present facts in court in order to win points. But you also have to make a narrative out of that, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
this is what you said.
Yeah, I think narrative is absolutely, essential to the kind of the human condition. I think that's the only way that really people empathise, by making them understand the story. But I was interested in sort of, so when I see when you're kind of creating a documentary, it's immensely precise. You're trying to create a reaction, aren't you? You're trying to provoke a reaction in your audience. You're thinking of your audience. You're telling a story. You're thinking of your audience. And you can see that each, frame is really carefully designed for that process. And I'm wondering, when Ricky's, painting, it's more of I feel like it's more of an internal thing as well. I mean, yes, you've got this underlying kind of political kind of, desire as well. But when you're actually kind of putting something on paper, it seems to me that you're not necessarily thinking about the reaction of the viewer, are you? No.
Not at all. No, not
so they're kind of very different things.
When I'm constructing a film, every frame is color, and the color sequencing is also about leading people's emotions. Because if I go from warm to cool, it actually changes. If I put a little bit of green in it, it feels and there's also questions of how each frame relates in terms of its internal composition. And the overriding thing in making film is rhythm.
For the last 4 or 5 years I've been working on these white and black pieces. Initially, the desire to put colour in was so strong. I kept having these different voices, a bit blue, and a bit blue, now a bit red. I knew that I really wanted to drop that. I really did, and it was, but we have those dilemmas within our work, don't we?
All the time.
And it all depends how strongly you listen to, how strongly the vision is for the piece of work that you want to do. Whether you listen to certain voices or not, don't you, in that dynamic of creating.
But do you think there are alternative ways in which you can sort of, as artists or documentary makers, subvert, if you like, that classical form of storytelling and yet be successful?
I tell you, I tend to be less concerned in the first place with form, because I'm much more concerned with content. I think the idea that the narrative is more important than the form, in the sense that it takes primary place. That's what I'm absolutely concerned about, is getting that narrative across to people. That's what I'm passionate about. What I do is I use all my acquired skills to do it in the best way possible, whether that means being romantic at a moment or harsh at a moment. I mean, there's different, if you look, you've seen the film, there are different patterns of cutting, which you probably felt but didn't think about particularly, where you have beautiful landscapes with warm light dissolving across from each other, with vague background sounds of nature and a little bit of a melody going through it. And then towards the end, I go to hard cuts where I have 2 black frames between images, so it doesn't happen. And it gets more crusty, it gets more edgy at the end, because actually the content is more edgy at the end than it is at the beginning.
I just would like to say that the sense of spending time in front of a piece of work, creating a piece of work, the ability to contemplate still images is really rapidly falling away from people, and so I think we need to turn that back as well, to demand.
As a lawyer, I very often feel I make very little difference until a celebrity comes along and bangs, a drum, and the government says, "Oh yeah, of course we'll do something," because you go about your little, in your little world and filing your cases, and it will maybe affect an individual. It might even affect, something a bit broader, but it feels quite difficult to affect change a lot of the time. If I'm trying to affect, change against a government department. That feels incredibly hard. So I'd be interested to hear how people kind of think, what are effective drivers for getting different things done.
A Romanian peasant, and I mean peasant, he had a donkey and a wooden plough, and he had a small holding. This Romanian peasant, who spoke very good English, he said to me, "Do you know the difference between communism and capitalism?" I said, "What?" And he said, "Under capitalism, man oppresses man. Under communism, it's just the opposite." And what that was about is many things actually, but it's also about the universal condition that we're all suffering. Our world has changed hugely in terms of the assumptions, and there's this very basic thing, which is I was brought up with the idea, it was an American idea then, and I'm sure it was here as well, that we were more important than I, and that production is more important than consumption. The way to understand oneself is not through history, which is the story of our peoples, but through psychology, which is the story of ourselves. And this preoccupation with the self and the creation of the atomization, which they purposely set out to do, because if you atomize the community, it means they get used to the idea that individualism is more important than collectivism, which means that when they started attacking the unions, the society was basically not with them, not for them. And you spew out all the arguments about, well, there's corrupt leadership and this and that. It worked. Whatever they decided to do, it worked, so that the culture is profoundly different now. And I think that's what we have to fight. But when you start arguing with somebody, you recognize that you're not just talking about a particular political point. You're talking about a whole history of education, a whole psychology, a whole set of experiences that you're confronting at that same moment, not just the particular. And when you realize that, then you realize, my God, we've got a big battle on. Because people are so indoctrinated by the neoliberal ideas that it's really, really difficult to change people's attitudes. And you can only do it, I think, integer by integer. Those people that you help, I mean, I would bet anything that something goes, wow, there are people there that care about me. Wow, there's a way in which I can use the law. There's people actually who say that they'll be on my side. And that allows them to start thinking differently about the world around them. And it allows them to overcome what I think the middle class suffer from is cynicism. And what the working class suffer from is a whole set of defeatist ideas about who and what they are. And that's what we're confronting. And I sort of see the world as a mass of human beings who just want to live a decent life. And on one side, there's those folks who want to say, actually, let them not see how the operation works. Because when they see that, they'll get the pitchforks out. And there's the other side, which I would imagine all of us in the room are part of, which is saying, no, actually what we want to do is let people know what the world is that they live in, and that reflection will allow them to begin to say, hold on, I need to go into the middle of the street and say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. In other words, one of the great benefits of good art is that it creates the possibility of hope and resistance.
Change started with very small groups. They didn't start with big groups, with big gatherings. They started with very small gatherings. And I think we are in that state. I think we need to keep having small gatherings of like-minded souls coming together. And slowly, things will, because the big change is not going to happen, is it? We need to do it very with compassion, with empathy.